Where's Carolyn? Thank you. In just 3 days, we will commemorate the 13th anniversary of September 11th. We will not only reflect upon, celebrate, and mourn those who we lost on that horrific day, we'll also honor our 9/11 heroes, including so many of those who are standing with us here today, who answered the call of duty when their nation needed them the most. And for too long, our 9/11 heroes, survivors, and my congressional delegation colleagues had to stand here at ground zero time and time again and fight hard to ensure Congress fulfilled its undeniable moral obligation by providing health care and compensation for our 9/11 responders and survivors. Nearly 4 years ago, working hand in hand with my partner, Senator Schumer, we followed every extraordinary effort that the House of Representatives made by Congressman Maloney, Congressman Nadler, Congressman King, and the united New York delegation, and we passed the James Zadroga 9/11 Health and Compensation Act. And it took tireless grassroots advocacy from incredible advocates such as John Field, Mario Salento, and the New York State AFL-CIO, Steve Cassidy and the UFA, everyone at the Uniformed Fire Officers Association, Pat Lynch and the PBA, Vincent Alvarez and the Central Labor Council, Catherine McVeigh Hughes, and all of our 9/11 responders and survivors. But let us not forget, too many of those who fought with us to pass this bill are no longer here with us. Heroes who walked the halls of Congress simply to force their government to do the right thing are gone. 70 of our bravest and 60 of our finest alone have died from 9/11 related illnesses. More than 2,900 people have been diagnosed with cancers caused by the aftermath of the attacks, and approximately 1,350 fire department and NYPD members are facing serious 9/11 related illnesses and have had to leave their jobs. The World Trade Center health program under this Zadroga bill continues to be a critical lifeline for many, and for some it means the difference between life and death. Currently, the program delivers treatment and medical care to nearly 30,000 responders and survivors who are sick. It provides medical monitoring for 60,000 responders. And no, this is not just a program for New Yorkers. They're from every state and live in 431 of the 435 congressional districts in the country. The Zadroga bill also reopened the Victims' Compensation Fund, known as the VCF, to make sure survivors are justly compensated for losses that they have experienced. The fund has made over 1,000 compensation decisions and has deemed over 7,000 injured 9/11 individuals eligible for compensation. But too many of our first responders and survivors face a serious health crisis that will far outlast the program's expiration date. So if Congress does not continue to fulfill its undeniable moral obligation by reauthorizing these programs, they will close, and our government will have turned its back on these heroes. That's not who we are as Americans. We stand by our veterans, and these heroes should be treated no differently than our men and women who wear the uniform, because they, too, answered the call of duty when our nation asked. Today, we are united to ensure that every 9/11 first responder and eligible survivor who was injured or made ill by the toxins at Ground Zero continue to receive the medical care and compensation they need and they deserve. I want to thank Mayor Bill de Blasio for making this reauthorization a priority of his new administration. The mayor is a fighter, and we could not be more proud to have him on our team. So just as our first responders and survivors worked hard to pass the 9/11 health bill in 2010, tirelessly walking the halls of Congress week after week, month after month, and year after year, we will do everything in our power to get this new legislation passed and signed into law. I know that we can do this. It shouldn't take another Christmas miracle for Congress to do the right thing. It should simply take listening to these heroes and reflecting on 9/11 and about who we are as a nation. Now I'd like to introduce Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney.
I want to thank Senator Gillibrand for her leadership and Senator Schumer and all my colleagues in government. But I know very well we will not pass this in the House of Representatives without the support of the Republican leadership, and I yield to my Republican partner who's going to help us get this bill through, Peter King.
Thank you, Carolyn. Let me at the outset thank Senator Gillibrand for the tremendous leadership she's shown on this. Jerrold Nadler and Carolyn Maloney, you have been there from the start. And Mayor de Blasio, it's great to have you with us here today because this will take an all-out effort. This is not a Republican issue. It's not a Democratic issue. This is an American issue. It's not a New York issue. Yes, New York was hit the hardest, but as Senator Gillibrand pointed out, 431 congressional districts have victims from 9/11. This is an issue which should be beyond debate. To have men and women suffering the worst diseases. All of us have friends, neighbors, constituents who are cut down in the prime of life. People who are running marathons who 2 or 3 years later can barely breathe. People today, you see them at their kids' Little League games in wheelchairs. This is absolutely wrong. We have an obligation as Americans to provide them with the health care they need, their families the compensation they need. And again, all of us said we will never forget 9/11. Well, if we forget the victims of 9/11, we have forgotten 9/11. We cannot allow the enemy to win. We can defeat them on the battlefield, but we must also make sure that those warriors who did the fighting, those who were down here in the days, weeks, and months following 9/11, who put their lives on the line, that our government stands with them, and that we Americans will never, ever abandon those who were there when our nation and our city needed them the most. So again, thank all of you being here today. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Pete. Our next speaker is Congressman Jerrold Nadler.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for your leadership, Senator, and thank Peter and Carolyn, and thank the Mayor for joining us and making this a priority of his administration. There are two moral imperatives why we must reauthorize the Zadroga bill. All the first responders, more than 30,000 responders and survivors, are sick and in need of special care today. We know, unfortunately, that thousands more will get sick, that will get cancers caused by 9/11. There are two moral imperatives why we must help them. One, because they're Americans. And because New York wasn't attacked, the United States was attacked. It is an imperative duty of the federal government, in Lincoln's words, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, unquote. And these 30,000 first responders and survivors, people who lived and worked down here, and the responders who worked on the pile, they are victims of an attack on the United States, and it is up to the United States to support them and to help them as we would the wounded in the armed forces in any war. That's the first moral imperative. The second moral imperative is that it was the deceit by the federal government, by the EPA, that came out and said, when we knew it wasn't true, that the air was safe to breathe, go back to work, go back to school, work on the pile without any special protection, that caused many of these people to get sick. There is a moral obligation because had it not been for the deceit by the federal government at the time, many of these people would have had proper protection, or they wouldn't have returned to work, or they wouldn't have gone to school, and the first responders would have worked with proper respirators and so forth. And this was especially true after the first couple of weeks. The first couple of weeks it was a rescue operation. Maybe someone is still there alive. After that, it was a cleanup. There was no rush for the cleanup to risk people's lives, but people's lives were risked because they were told by the federal government that there was no problem and no environmental contamination when we knew perfectly well there was. So the second moral obligation is that we must seek to heal those who are sick because of the federal government. We passed this legislation after an epic struggle in 2010. And what Kirsten or Carolyn, I forget who, referenced as the Christmas miracle, the last minute passed in the House and the Senate. It was a long struggle. I hope it will not be a long struggle again. The people who are now getting treated must continue to get treated. The people who have not yet been diagnosed but will be diagnosed must not be left hanging because it's a few years. We cannot allow it to be said that in 13 years, that's how long we remembered 9/11. We set up a museum. We gave lip service to it, but we forgot the victims in 13 years. We cannot allow that to be said. It would be a moral stain on this generation and on the United States. And that's why we must reauthorize this legislation. And that's why I'm glad all the people who are here, all the union leaders, all the city administration leaders, and Senator Gillibrand and others are going to work with all of us to fulfill our moral obligation and pass this legislation. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Congressman Carolyn Maloney.
Thank you so much. It's almost like a reunion to be here. This is the team that worked well over a decade to pass this bill, and it's wonderful to see my colleagues in Congress, Senators Gillibrand and Schumer, and of course Congressman Nadler and King. This was really an effort that we worked on every single day. All of the advocates, John Field and many others, and all of the residents, the victims. I'm particularly happy to see the mayor taking an active leadership role to push this through. Thank you so much. And the father of James Zadroga, Mr. Zadroga, is here. We named it after his son. He was the first one to die from 9/11 related illnesses, and it took the city 6 months to admit that he died from 9/11. It was a struggle every day to get this bill through, and it was so needed. I particularly want to thank the true Twin Towers of New York, our police and our fire, and all of their comrades that worked with them on rebuilding and on saving lives on that dreadful, dreadful day. We know that on 9/11 we lost roughly 3,000 lives, but since then thousands and thousands more have died because of illnesses that they contracted working on the pile, working there for months in deadly toxic fumes. And so we do not intend to wait another 10 years to reauthorize this. We are calling for a 25-year extension. The bill expires in October 16th, but we are not going to wait 10 years to reauthorize it. We're starting ahead of schedule. We're building support, and we are going to let the families and the victims know that we are going to be there for them. The bill will expire in 2016, but their illnesses are not going to expire, and they may get new illnesses that are sleeping in their bodies now. They have already identified over 29 different cancers directly related to having worked in the deadly fumes and the deadly conditions of 9/11. So on that day, we said, and America said, and I will tell you, I have never seen Congress so united and determined as when we came together on 9/11. We were determined to rebuild and make our country stronger, and we did. But the health care took longer, and we have that same determination here today. We know that more than 800 New York Fire Department members and more than 550 New York Police Department personnel are struggling with 9/11 serious illnesses. We know that we've already lost over 70 firefighters since 9/11 just because of the illnesses they contracted. And 60 New York Police Department officers have died from 9/11 related illnesses. It took a terrible toll on our people. And when we say we will never forget, we mean we will never forget. We're not going to forget after 5 years when the bill expires. We will never forget. As long as individuals who saved others' lives, who worked to rebuild our great city are ill, we will be there for them, and we will never forget. I want to tell you how really honored I am and proud to work with so many others over the course of well over a decade who vowed they will never forget, and they are the ones who made the Zadroga law a reality. And we are determined to keep it as a reality, serving and compensating those families that paid such a price. And I feel especially proud and privileged to be here today in the company of such heroes and heroines that fought to save lives, to rebuild, and I'd say the heroes and heroines in government that are there to make sure, and in medical services and other areas, and the union leadership. We would never have done it without the state and the city AFL-CIO. And we are in the company of those who willingly join me in saying that we will keep our word to you. We will never forget what happened here. We will never forget what was endured and suffered. And we will never forget our promise to you to reauthorize the James Zadroga Health and Compensation Act. Thank you. Everyone here is part of this victory. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mayor Bill de Blasio.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, Senator Gillibrand, your extraordinary focus and energy and commitment have been crucial to how much has been won already for the first responders. If you hadn't said that you were going to see this through no matter what was thrown at you, we wouldn't be standing here today. Let's thank Senator Gillibrand for all that she's done. In the House, Carolyn Maloney, Jerrold Nadler, Peter King, they've all stood up for our first responders. And it's hard in the House of Representatives to get things done, but they found a way, and I have confidence they will find a way again. The logic that Senator Gillibrand laid out related to our history, what we owe to people who have served us. You know, a lot of us here are children of folks who served in the military. When my father came home from World War II, there was no question that he was going to get the GI Bill. When my wife's father came home from World War II, there was no question he was going to get the GI Bill. Why is there a question? The brave men and women who served under the most adverse circumstances after an attack on our country. Why is there a question about them getting what they deserve? There should be no question. This should not be a debate. This should be simply a march to action to help those in need. We've all fought together before. I want to thank everyone in labor, Mario Salento of the state AFL-CIO, and Vinny Alvarez of the City Central Labor Council, and Chris Shelton of the communications workers. We've all fought together, and we fought side by side with our brothers and sisters from the Uniformed Services Union. We had many a day where we came together to say that justice has to be done here. I stood with Pat Lynch of the PBA. I stood with James Lamonda, the new president of the UFOA, and so many others who called for basic justice for people who had done so much. We're still fighting that fight. We have to see it through to conclusion. I want to thank, there's been so many people, some famous, some less famous, but they've all stood up for these first responders. We all know, and we've all been inspired by John Feel and the Feel Good Foundation. Thank you so much, John. And Catherine McVeigh Hughes of Community Board 1, thank you for all you've done. We've had so many allies who get it. We need our voices to be heard in Washington. Yes, it is a moral imperative. It's something we have to set as an example that we will always stand by people who answer the call. We lost hundreds and hundreds of devoted public servants that terrible day. We lost thousands of civilians. And then we started losing more. And we've all felt it very personally. In June of this year, I attended a ceremony for 12 fallen NYPD officers who served at Ground Zero and later lost their lives because of the illnesses they contracted here. We're still trying to save people. We're still memorializing people we lose each and every year. This is still happening, and it means it deserves an urgent response. And something my colleague said, and please, I ask our friends in the news media to amplify this point. The people who came to serve did not just come from the 5 boroughs. They didn't just come from the metropolitan area. They came from all over the country. Almost every congressional district in this nation had representatives come here. People, first responders, came here. So this is truly national. It was an attack on our nation. The response was national. The people who are suffering today are all around our nation. Their private insurance just isn't doing it for them. We have to do more. I'll finish by saying simply, it's so appropriate that we remember 9/11 in so many ways. It's so appropriate that we have the powerful memorial near this site that People go to and reflect upon those they lost. They reflect upon what we owe to their memory. Let's do more than just reflect upon those who are still alive, who we can help right now, whose suffering we can ease. Let's devote ourselves to them. Let's walk hand in hand with them. Let's get our Congress to do the right thing and support our heroes. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mario Cilento, President of the New York State AFL-CIO.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you. I want to thank Senator Gillibrand and certainly Mayor de Blasio, Jerrold Nadler, Carolyn Maloney, Peter King, all of our elected officials who are here today, all of the labor leaders here today. We have labor leaders from the public sector, the private sector, building trades. We have the president of the Central Labor Council here, Vinny Alvarez. Because the message today is pretty straightforward and simple. We must reauthorize this funding. And there are a lot of reasons for it. Two above all else. First, those who gave their lives made a commitment to us. They made a commitment to us that they were going to risk their lives to save others and to rebuild this city. Well, we have a moral responsibility and an obligation to keep our commitment to them, which is to make sure they continue to have health care now and well into the future for as long as they want it, because we have chronic illnesses, long-term illnesses. Second, we continue to find new individuals who come through now with symptoms, who are getting sick. And they shouldn't be penalized just for the reason that they're just starting to show these symptoms now. We have the same responsibility and obligation to them. Now, we've heard this countless times over the last 13 years. Ground Zero was a battlefield. It was a battlefield. Now, this is not a military setting, but we all understand the rules of battle, and that is you never leave anyone behind on the battlefield, ever. And I can tell you that the labor movement in this state will never leave our brothers and sisters behind, ever. So this is what we're going to do. The state AFL-CIO represents 2.5 million members in this state, 3,000 local unions. We will work with the Central Labor Council and President Alvarez to contact all of the other 49 state labor federations across this country, work with them, work with the National AFL-CIO in Washington to work with their congressional delegations. You know, we have a very strong relationship with our elected officials in this state, and we're proud of that. We are going to make sure that the other 49 states work with their congressional delegations to make sure that they understand, they educate their elected officials on what needs to be done here. That is the role that we will play as a labor movement, because, again, we will never leave our brothers and sisters behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great job, Mario.
Mario, good job.
Our next speaker is James Zadroga, President of Uniform Fire Officers Association.
Good morning. I'm Jake Lamonda, President of the Uniform Fire Officers Association. I stand here today with our elected official and our fellow labor leaders. 13 years ago, America was dropped to its knees. The ground was still shaking with terror. The air was filled with poison. But my brothers and sisters, we responded, because that's what we do. We lift up each other in times of crisis. Between the construction trades, the police department, the fire department, EMS, the labor unions, the municipal unions, we all came up to help each other. I'm asking politicians, our elected officials in Washington, to set politics aside, reach across the aisle, sign this legislation unconditionally. Be brave like the men and women that responded day after day to help this country rebound. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jim Slevin, Uniform Firefighters Association.
Good morning. 13 years ago, 343 New York City firefighters were killed, 37 Port Authority police officers, and 23 NYPD police officers. Their sacrifices were never in question. Almost 3,000 civilians were killed along with them. We rightfully recognize their sacrifice and compensated their families. But we cannot forget the sacrifice that continues to be made every single day by the hundreds of people, thousands of people, this number keeps growing, of firefighters, police officers, residents of Lower Manhattan, construction workers, building trades, other first responders. They continue to get sick in record numbers, and they're getting sick with serious diseases such as cancer, respiratory ailments, and things that are life-threatening. Cancer has no expiration date. The James Zadroga Act should also have no expiration date. We must do everything we can to ensure that we get the proper funding for screening, for treatment, and for compensation for those that continue to sacrifice. And this 9/11, we're going to ask you not only to remember those that made the ultimate sacrifice on 9/11, but keep in your thoughts and prayers those that continue to get sick, those that have died post 9/11 from 9/11 related illnesses. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Pat Lynch, President of the NYC Patrolmen's Benevolent Association.
Thank you, Senator. On September 11th, on this very spot, when those planes struck, thousands upon thousands of New York City citizens ran north. While they were running for their life, New York City police officers calmly moved south. They asked no questions. They didn't say who's in there, what they sound like, are they male or are they female. They asked, where are they? Let's get them. Their mothers, their fathers, their husbands and wives and children we need to bring home. And they did that for hours, they did that for days, they did that for months. When this city was brought to its knees, New York City police officers gave them their shoulders so they can hoist themselves up and get the stability that it needed. Now New York City police officers, when they walk up the steps of their stoop to their home, need a shoulder so they can make those 5 or 6 steps. Now it's the turn of our elected officials, the citizens alike, to give their shoulder to New York City police officers so that they can breathe, they can move. This is not an entitlement. This is not a give out. This is not a giveaway. This is about right and it's about wrong. It's about allowing people to live. It's quite simple. New York City police officers and firefighters in our trades just want to get the treatment they need so they can breathe and they can go home. God bless each and every one of you.
Our next speaker is Vincent Alvarez, President of the New York City Central Labor Council.
Thank you, and thank you, Senator Gillibrand, Mayor de Blasio, our entire congressional delegation. And I think, Pat, you summed it up well. You know, last week we celebrated Labor Day in this country. We've been doing it for over 100 years, and people from every walk of life labored down here. Not just over 600 trade unionists, whether they be first responders from police and fire and construction workers and communication workers and so many others who were down here that day doing what they had to do to get our city back up and running and to preserve life and to keep this city and this country moving and get this city and country moving again. And it saw, sometimes we say it saw the worst of society, but it also saw the best of America. It saw the best of New Yorkers coming together in a way which we know we now have to honor. And the best way that we could honor the dead and honor the fallen is to fight for the living, do it in a unified way, as our president from the state AFL-CIO, Mario Salento, indicated we will, and make sure that we reauthorize this bill. We take care of those who took care of the city, and those of us in the New York City labor movement will stand side by side with our elected officials to make sure that that's done. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Vincent. Our next speech is John Field, President of the Feel Good Foundation.
Thank you. In 3 days, as a nation, we pay homage to those we lost on that horrific day. But let's finish the sentence. We're still losing people every day, every week, from 9/11 and its aftermath. We pray for the dead, but we fight like hell for the living. Simple. Today starts a new chapter. Joe, your son's name will not go in vain. His legacy will continue for another 25 years. Yes. To everybody holding signs, to all the respondents here, failure is not an option. A day before we got that bill passed, 1,300 days ago, I almost got arrested. I'm prepared to almost get arrested again to ensure we extend this bill 25 years. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Well said. Our next speaker is Catherine McVeigh Hughes, Chair of the Manhattan Community Board 1.
Thank you. Wow, that's hard to follow always after John and everybody else. The announcement of the reauthorization bill for the Zadroga Act is the first step to continued care for those still suffering due to their exposure to World Trade Center toxins. Many survivors also need this program for health care and compensation. Thousands are still sick, and even more have become sick or died since we passed the act in 2010. The World Trade Center Environmental Health Center Health Program has done an incredible job serving thousands of survivors, and many survivors have applied for the compensation under the Victims' Compensation Fund. The reauthorization bill for the Zadroga Act is critical for both the responder and survivor population for the continuing needs due to 9/11 toxin exposures. We must all come together to pass this bill so that these vital programs continue. And I want to thank everybody who is here today and made today possible, and I hope we win. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Our last speaker is Alex Sanchez, a 9/11 cleanup worker. Thank you, Alex. Thank you for bringing everyone.
9/11 contamination does not discriminate. On 9/11, many of us who are here came down here to help our city, enact our economy, and our nation. Today, I took the liberty to invite many Latino cleanup workers to support the senator. We're here today. We're not going to stop. May God bless our nation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex. Now, I just want to conclude by acknowledging some people who are standing with us. Joseph Zadroga, the father of James Zadroga, is right here, has stepped every step of the way with us. Mickey Siegel from the Communication Workers of America. Dennis Traynor from the Communications Workers of America, District 1. Guillermina Mejia, Director of Safety and Health Department, District Council 37. And Dr. Jim Milius, New York State Laborers Health and Safety Fund. All of these advocates are standing here with us today. Thank you all for being here. We'll take on-topic questions. And Chris Shelton's here as well, from Communication Workers. Yes, there are definitive studies linking 9/11 toxins to cancers. And in fact, when we passed the bill, we left that open because a lot of the science was undergoing science experiments and analysis. And a lot of them have been concluded and found direct connection. So now there's a handful, several dozen, I think, of 67 diseases that have been confirmed.
2,800 have cancer now.
And 2,800 have cancer now. But there's diseases that have been confirmed officially that are now eligible for full health care benefits under the Zadroga Act. And the bill is written so that as the science continues to document more disease causation and relation, they can all be covered.
Senator, what made you come up with the number 25 here?
We don't want it to expire again, so we don't want to have to do this. This takes a lot of effort to pass this bill. I can speak for my colleagues. We worked every day on it practically for 7 years with labor, with victims, with everyone. So we want a long time so we don't have to reauthorize it again. We do know that the cancers and some of these other latent diseases are coming up now, and they're not going to go away. If anything, they're going to get worse. And so we want to take care of it with one bill passing with 25 years.
Also, if I could say, what it does do, it provides a sense of certainty for the victims and their families and for the medical profession so that people can gauge what the costs are going to be and they can plan ahead and not have to worry about this coming up every 3, 4, 5 years and sort of hanging in the balance. So I'd say the main reason is get that sense of certainty out there.
It also aligns with general life expectancy, so it should cover our first responders.
How likely is the reauthorization passage in Congress right now? Is there any opposition at the moment?
This is something we are going to fight very hard for. And as many of our speakers said, it's an issue of right versus wrong. It's not a Democratic issue. It's not a Republican issue. It's about standing by those who stood by us. And as we passed the bill last time, I think we will pass the bill again because this nation stands up for its heroes, and they will stand up for our heroes again.
Woo. Reauthorized for 25 years, do you have an estimated cost of the program?
We don't, but the way we drafted the bill is as sums as necessary because, again, we don't know how many people will develop cancer. We don't know how expensive their treatments will be, but we want to make it available. So we want to make sure that their health care is covered no matter what. We know what we've spent so far, but we haven't spent enough to do a full actuary analysis of the likelihood, so the range is really wide. So we don't have an exact number.
What have you spent so far?
I have those numbers, about $300 million on VCF and about $800 million on health care.
Senator, I understand why volunteers might need this help, but first responders have medical insurance pretty much for life.
Pretty much the story, if you talk to any of these first responders, is they've exhausted all health care they're entitled to through their employers and through private insurance. And so they blow through whatever caps they're allowed, they blow through whatever lifetime limits are allowed because these diseases are so expensive. So if you talk to any one individual, they will tell you their personal story of how they had to go into bankruptcy just to pay for their health care. Their health care isn't covered.
Are you talking about police and fire?
Correct. It's not a blank check. It's actually limited, and they have exhausted all the care they are entitled to, and that's why we have to provide it by the federal government, as we would for a veteran of a war.
It's also unique care. This has never happened before, where so many chemicals were in people's bodies, and a very important arm of it is monitoring and research is taking place. We have centers of excellence where they go for very specialized treatment for the very specialized diseases that they have. We are also studying, God forbid that it ever happens again, better ways that we can treat, better ways we can help people. But the research, monitoring, and the special treatment centers for excellence that are designed specifically for anyone exposed. And I would say the press, too, should be part of these programs that covered 9/11, and we're down there.
Let me just add also that one of the things Carolyn mentioned, the centers of excellence. We have a concentration, obviously, in the New York area of victims, of people whose health was severely impacted by this. But as was mentioned before, people are all over the country. But we have the experience, we're gaining the experience here. One of the features of the program set up by the bill, which has to be reauthorized, is in effect to set up these centers of excellence around the country and to spread the knowledge and the experience so that if someone gets sick in Des Moines, Iowa, and is one of 3 people in Des Moines, they have the knowledge and the experience gathered from around the country, and especially in this area, to know how to treat these conditions, which may be unique or present themselves in unique and combined ways.
Sure. And a follow-up to that question is on the different benefits we get, like our prescription drugs, there's caps on that. You get a certain amount of money from the city, and that has to cover everything. And with that, there's limits and caps. This was also line of duty for police officers and firefighters and others, which gets paid by the city. And there's programs set up to look at the specifics of the illnesses that we're getting from September 11th, which needs to be paid out. So the belief is that you have full coverage for the rest of your life and everything's covered. That's not actually the truth.
Also, if you were a non-uniform worker and you lost your job, you lost your insurance. So it doesn't matter if you were a paid volunteer or a volunteer. Once you lose your job, you probably lose your insurance within 60, 90 days.
Senator, can you speak about the October 12th deadline for people with existing cancer to register for the Zadroga fund? If they don't register by then, they're out.
That's right.
I just wanted to add, I was asked to add one thing again. If anyone out there is sick or thinks they're sick, and they ought to present themselves even if they are not documented. This program is for people, whether they're documented or not, because the moral judgment was made by Congress that if you worked on the pile, if you risked your life to help your fellow Americans, even if you're not a citizen or you're not documented, you ought to we ought to take care of our injured, because they are our injured, whether they're documented or not, if they helped us.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Great
job.